Please, can you talk about the origin of the work critical art theory? Is it a recent idea or an idea that you have been considering for a while? Why does it feel important to you to be making this work now? The way I was taught art history was that it somehow was independent of the real world. Like this painting right here is about France. And France in the 19th century was in chaos. Yet, if you look at the art independently, it's developing, it's the start of modernism, right? And if you looked at France and you say, well, France in the 19th century was this wonderful land of bourgeois life that was bucolic, the sun was shining and people were having wine and dancing and drinking. That is not what France was like. I've always wanted to do something on art history that kind of covered this sort of dichotomy, or whatever you want to call it, that art was here and life was here somehow. And I've always wanted to do something, but I never had time. Whatever issues were happening then, I would do my artwork about that. And you can't do both. You can't start this kind of a thing and then also do that. So I had to make a choice, and I said, I'm going to do this because I didn't know how exactly, but I've always wanted to do it. So you start it and see what happens. All right, and that's the way this piece began. And so right now I'm trying to do this. I don't know where it's going, what's going to happen to it, but I've done that with everything I did. I just start it and see what happens. Why does it feel important to you now? Well, look at me. I'm going to be 87 years old in November. If I don't do it now, do I wait 10 years? Or do I do it now? So you must make a choice. Am I going to cover the Trump administration? Well, I think there's an awful thing happening in America. Or do I do this? I wanted to do this, so I did it. Now, I've done the Trump administration, the first one. You'll look it up. You'll see all this stuff about him. It applies today, exactly what he's doing today is what I criticized back in 2016. Can you tell us what you specifically remember about your art history classes? How did they look, feel, sound, and what else were you doing at the time? Well, the art history classes were taught with a slide projector, a slide screen, a lectern, and a blackboard. The guy would read his notes, and sometimes he's just reading the notes. He'd flash a slide up there. What do I remember about art history class? When you didn't have the devices. You got to understand this. You never had recording devices. I could never afford one, certainly. Some people had these transistor kind of things, but you couldn't take a picture of it like you can, or get it on your cell phone or store it somewhere. What I had to do was there was a little overhead light, and I had notebooks. I had tons of notebooks, and I would start drawing the picture. The reason I did that, because if that picture disappeared, I had no other way of reproducing it. I couldn't find it. I didn't have the books. There weren't the books that you have now, or the internet that you have now. I would have to memorize that picture, and the way I did it was I would sketch really fast. I could draw really fast and get an approximation of that picture enough that I could remember it. And you got to know, I got good at that. And today, the piece you're looking at, look at those little pictures there. I'm not trying to reproduce those pictures. Some of them are huge and detailed that you could never get at that level. But I can do them pretty well, pretty quick. And just enough for you to say, oh, that's that picture. In those days, again, I had to do it really fast, and I got good at it. I got straight A's in every history, and I took every history class I can get hold of. I bet I took them all that were being taught there. Now remember, the history classes did not have ethnic studies, black, Chicano art, none of that. They had about Asian art or Mesopotamian art, things like that. I got straight A's, except for one class, and to this day I'm angry about it, because it was an essay test. I wrote the essay from what this male prof was teaching. He, at the last day, said he had to leave on some sabbatical thing, was urgent, but his wife would grade the papers. She gave me a B. was really ticked off. And I'm ticked off to this day. I don't know why I brought that up. Funny. How they look and sound and feel? Well, you learned how sound was important. You learned how to say the words, all right? What else was I doing at that time? I was living in a $75 boarding house run by an old Japanese lady, 2 meals a day. I lived on a street called Federal Avenue, which is at least 4 blocks from Santa Monica Boulevard. And when I brought a painting home, I had to take it on the bus, paint in my little tiny room, paint the picture, and then carry it 4 blocks, to the bus stop. Now, the bus drivers were good guys, because there was a little slot that you could put your paintings in by the front door. Between the window and there's a railing there, and you could slide them in there. And the back door had the same thing. The door opens up, but there was a little place you can slide them. They let me do that. And then you would carry them up to it was called Dixon Hall. When I talk about white people, that sounds like I'm criticizing them. No, what I'm criticizing. They have had what I'm saying is just a tiny drop in the bucket. They have had the overwhelming power to tell the story they want the way they want to. But there were good people out there. I remember there's a store called Flax down in Westwood. Right? It was about a half mile down the hill into Westwood. You saw it was a hippie and you had to walk down to it. I would buy stretcher bars there. And everyone told me, these guys are cheating you and they're horrible guys. So I bought some stretcher bars, and then he said, "Hey, where's your car?" I said, "I don't have one." And he looked at me and he said, "Come here." And he took me to his Cadillac, his convertible Cadillac, put the stretcher bars in, and he drove me to school. That's how nice some people can be, all right? I don't know why I told you that story. That's what I was doing at the time, painting as much as I could, I do these odd jobs, peeling shrimp, gardening and stuff. But I couldn't afford the $75 a month and the materials and stuff. My parents did it for me, They worked 7 days a week, 364 days a year to put me through school. That one day they took off was Memorial Day, where they would visit the graves of their relatives. Many of their images and words in this series are found or quoted from an archive that you have built up over many years. This archive is made up of found material taken from, among other things, commercial signage and advertising, newspapers, television, the internet, political pamphlets and posters, as well as presumably art galleries and museums. What is the origin of this archive, and can you talk about how and why it has become so central to your work? I collected pictures my whole life. In camp, you're kind of deprived of pictures. All right? When I got out of camp, my father subscribed to Life magazine. I couldn't wait for it to come at the end of the week. It's full of pictures, and eventually I got to collect from them. Most people, when you came out of camp, were hostile, but there were other people who weren't. Other people that were. One was a crossing guard. It was an elderly woman who somehow she knew I loved to draw airplanes. And so one day she gave me a couple notebooks full of airplane pictures that had been collected by somebody in her family but had grown out of them. She gave them to me, and it was like a treasure chest. So even when I was in elementary school, I'm sure what these letters look like, but I'd write in pencil to every airplane company that I knew of, North American, Boeing, Grumman, Republic, and I sent them a letter and said, "Could you send me airplane pictures?" I don't know what they thought on that end, but some of them did, and they were like magical pictures to me. And then so that started on this collection binge. Now, I had no other resources, you know, so I had to save those pictures. I came across one in a magazine, I came across one in a newspaper, or whatever it was. I would collect it, and I ended up with boxes and boxes and notebooks full of it. Also, later when I started to get enough money, I would buy books because I never had books. So I get book after book. Right now, there are two rooms upstairs in which there's no furniture. It's full of books. I don't use them anymore. I would literally sit there for days going through boxes of pictures looking for what I'm looking for. Or through those books, book after book after book after book. Am I doing that today? No. I still got the books and I still got boxes of images, but I haven't got time to go through them. You know, because whenever I would look up a subject matter, I had to go through boxes. Luckily, I'm not a good filer, but I would say this box is for airplanes, this box is for cars, so I could go through maybe fewer boxes, but I have to go through them each time. Do I want to spend my time that way? No. So I use this thing. Because you can find it there. It's the way I have to do it now. So I don't do this. I still collect pictures. I'm lying. But I use them very sparingly now. Some of the works in critical art theory include images and language that are violent, xenophobic, and racist. Some people may find this upsetting or offensive, or might think that the reproduction of this material only contributes to ongoing negative stereotypes. Can you tell us why you think it is necessary for you to include this material in your work? I thought of two different artists that deal with racial stereotypes. One is Roger Shimamura, who does Japanese American racial stereotypes, and Andres Serrano, who did things on Black African American stereotypes. Shimamura is a guy from Seattle who's about the same age as I am, so we had the same experience. He was from Seattle, so they sent him to Minidoka, which is a camp in Idaho. And just like Poston, the camp I was in Arizona, it was a nowhere place. No one wanted to live there. I think the rationale partly was that if you escaped from the barbed wire, there was no place to go. And does that sound familiar, by the way? There's what is it called? Alligator Alcatraz by President Trump. He wants to put all these and talk about stereotypes, murderers and rapists to that camp because there's nowhere to go but the Everglades if you escape the camp. So there's a logic behind putting us in those kinds of places. I don't know about his experience because he went back to Seattle, but I went back to San Bernardino after camp, and everybody hated us. Everyone hated us because all they knew about us was those racial stereotypes. They were, showing the fangs and the buck teeth, and that's all they knew. One of the big slogans of that era was "Remember Pearl Harbor," and they still do. Every December 7th, they'll show you those films of the Arizona and the ships burning. Just like Remember Pearl Harbor, what we're saying is also don't forget racial stereotypes, those things that created the hate and the power that California had with those racial stereotypes to put us into camp. Although logically it made no sense, and it's happening again. Like Trump is stoking that, building it. So we use those stereotypes because I think they have power. They will want you to remember because you don't know about it. Don't tell me you do. You don't remember what it was like being back there at that time. I want you to know what it was like. He wants you to know what it was like. Andres Serrano is the other guy I'm thinking of. I've heard him talk with Dr. David Pilgrim, who is a head of the Jim Crow Museum, and he's talking about how he's just like me. He says, I don't make a decision of what I'm going to do by committee, all right? And what he's doing, I think, is, I wish I'd have said this, he's kind of holding up a mirror to you. You see yourself in one way or another out of that, whatever he's showing you. So what he does, and he's a photographer, he takes these big, I don't know what you call them. I used to call them Cibachromes, but whatever they are, big photographs in bright living color. And his most famous piece is Epice Christ, which was, incidentally, attacked and damaged in one show in France. So people hated that image. I think he owns all these objects. So he bought a whole bunch of objects that he photographs. And he showed him in a show called Infamous. Infamous because they're racial stereotypes about black people. A week before the opening of his infamous show, they withdrew 5 pieces. The exhibition said, no, we can't show these 5. And the 5 were about lynchings. He had, I think, collected photographs of lynchings, so it's ubiquitous. These photographs were on postcards. Postcards. They would send them in the mail saying, hey, look, we hanged this guy. Well, he wasn't trying to shock you, but he felt that was part of the imagery that he was trying to get across in Infamous. If he wanted to shock you, he can find photographs, just like you can if you look on the internet, of lynchings. Now, they're all gruesome, don't get me wrong, but there are some that are horrendous. If you just wanted to shock people, show them with the burnt and mutilated bodies that are often shown. Serrano and David Pilgrim of the Jim Crow Museum. Jim Crow Museum's in a small college. It's Ferris College Ferris University, I think it is, in Michigan. And he started collecting as a youth. As an 11-year-old kid, he started collecting these racial stereotypes of African Americans. The first one he did was one of those mammy things. This stuff is not rare stuff. He's got more stuff than you can possibly show. And because he could find them everywhere, anywhere in the United States, because they were part of the system to keep the stereotypical image of black people alive. They were everywhere. They were horrible, but they kept the system. Black people are this, black people are that, all right? So the first one he bought was at 11 years old, and he broke it. And he started collecting them, and he amassed this huge amount of material that he shows today. He has that oyster can, and he shows it. But he comes at it like you have to come at it. See, I come at it from Serrano's point of view. I do what I have to do. He comes at it from your point of view. What do you do when you have to display it? He had some good comments. He said that as a museum director, he has to contextualize it. And by that, I think he meant that he not only shows this horrible stuff, but he shows you other positive images later with the Tuskegee Airmen and things like this that show black progress. And so he puts it into context. Now, I'm doing the same thing, but you're stopping right at the 19th century. So the one I'm working on, photography, shows you how African Americans started to take control of their own image. Instead of showing nannies and slaves all the time, they showed themselves. Beautiful pictures of African Americans. That's the contextualizing, but you don't get that half with what you're seeing now. You're just seeing that's the 19th century. Now, a lot of that stuff comes right up to date. Don't kid yourself. So in my lifetime, it came to 1965 where it was out in the open. That hatred and things. So it comes. He had a kind of interesting statement. He said, history has proven that the past never remains in the past. And he also says that's a learning experience. I know that you've got to get some learning thing out of it. I hope that happens in my case also. He says that some people think that if you stop talking about racial or historical racism will go away. He says no. He says in order for you to achieve social justice, you have to get away from happy history to honest history. That's the only way you can get to kind of resolve some of these difficulties. I don't know if I have anything else to say, Jen. One of the things I want to talk about is back behind me. We didn't put these for this purpose, but it just happened to be what I'm talking about. One is how you approach this, all right, as an artist. All right? One is you can take the Goya way of doing it, and one of those graphics things is about Napoleon occupied Spain, and to take over another country. This is colonization, because they set up a whole phony government too. Whenever you have colonization, there's nothing good about colonization. It's done by force and brutality. All right? So he shows that on his graphic. Now, the other approach is France. During this time we're talking about, because I just after you selected the show, I'm still working on it because, as I said, it's in progress. So I just did this one on France. France, 19th century, was turmoil, revolution, the siege of Paris, where you're eating rats and cats and dogs and the elephants in the zoo, and the I couldn't even think of the word. Even you were having the siege of Paris and the Commune in 1871. That's about the time Impressionism was forming. Now, the Impressionists took the approach that you don't deal with that, which is fine. If you don't want to deal with it as an artist, fine. I love those paintings. The paintings I may be criticizing for one aspect, I think are very beautiful pictures. But they did not touch what was happening around them. That's another approach that you can take, and that's fine. And those are feel-good paintings. Look at Impressionism. I mean, it's bourgeois heaven. Drinking wine, boating, fine. Beautifully done. Beautiful paint job, beautiful brushwork. But it chooses not to deal with it. But if some others choose to deal with it, like Manet is a transition point, because he covers a lot of that. He covers the Commune, because he was around. And a lot of the other guys fled. It's what you want to do with it. But it's still there. Just like I was talking about with Akins and Tanner. That's what 19th century America was like. And for them, the white guys, to do black people, courage. Right? And the African American artists, split. Some people again, would argue that it is inappropriate for an artist to portray the suffering and subjugation of communities that they are not part of. What is your view on this? It's going to take a little time to tell you how this is not a hypothetical question. Right? It's real to me because it happened to me, and I will tell you that the thing is not whether it'll affect me. I know I'm not going to change. But you have you on that end. And I'll tell you my story, okay? And it's going to start back with the AIDS epidemic. I don't know how old you are, but some of you might be under 30. I think you have people over there that are under 30 that you're associated with, and that all of you were probably very young at the time of the AIDS epidemic, which is 1980s and 90s, basically. If you were diagnosed HIV positive, you were going to die a slow, miserable death. There was no cure. No one knew how it started. It was killing these guys that were in the peak of their careers, young, healthy guys, seemingly before. And the reason was that nothing was being done by the Reagan administration. They were very slow on the uptake. Until it started affecting the general population a little bit, that they came in on it. It's because he was supported, like today, our president today, by evangelical, just Christians in general, right? Now, what they said was, these guys are blasphemous sodomites. God is punishing them. And that, not only that, but when they died, they were going to hell and burn for eternity. Not for 10 years, not for a lifetime, forever. So I started a series of kind of doing portraits of individuals that died of disease. I started because two of my dear friends, Fidel Daniele and a guy named Don Sorensen, died of the disease. It was terrorizing the gay communities. It was, you cannot explain how frightening it was. Fidel was from a very conservative Catholic family. He had a brother, he said, that hated him because he was going into art, which is a sissy thing. When we were in school together at UCLA in graduate school, and sometimes they would ask you to meet off campus, for instance, at the prof's house, which was in Malibu. I had no car, but Fidel had this little red sports car, Triumph, beautiful little thing, you know. I was very low, two-seater only, you know, of course. And he would drive me. And he would go through those hills like that, you know, too fast, turning the curves like that. I called him Fangio because Fangio was a Formula One, I think it was, but I don't know what kind of race car he was driving, but he was well known at that time. And we would laugh all the way through this. He was in the closet though. You know, he was gay, we found out later, but he married. He had a wife who was an artist, and they had an art team together. He also wrote for Art Forum. He and I were, I think, very good friends. Now, his marriage dissolved and we lost contact for about 20 years. I think it was about 20 years later. UCLA had a reunion show of the 1960s master's candidates because some of them had become. And I walked in the room and I saw Fidel across the room. The way I recollect he was wearing, now I don't know if this is quite accurate, but my recollection, he was wearing like skin-tight black leather. He was in full biker garb, like silver studs, chains, the whole number. I remember clearly, though, he had lots of eye makeup, you know, black eye makeup. So he turned and looked, he saw me, and of course I looked kind of the same. He said, "Ben." And I said, "Fidel." And we just started talking like we had just talked yesterday. "Hey, what happened to that red Triumph of yours?" You know, and we just went on. He died of AIDS. Now, you gotta understand that those days, AIDS was kind of a shame thing too, that you were gay, and his family apparently didn't like that. So when you read bits of people that died of AIDS, often they would say things like, and in his case, after a long illness. The other guy was Don Sorensen. Don Sorensen was a teaching colleague of mine who would be teaching next door, a few doors down. He did these zigzag paintings I thought were beautiful pictures. Well, what about the art community? There weren't a lot of art shows. The piece I started to make never got shown at a major institution in LA. It got shown at junior colleges, people that understood who I was. It, strange enough, got also shown in New York, because somebody, like in your case, somebody in London, somebody in New York, looks at the stuff and doesn't care what I was teaching, what I was doing. They looked at it and said, "Hey, that's interesting." They showed it at Alternative Museum in New York. Point of the story is that I would show it to these junior colleges, and there'd be other artists involved. But one day I get a phone call, and the phone call is from a guy in Long Beach. And he said, he wanted, I can't remember what institution it was, but it was a small venue. He said, "I want to show I wanted to show an AIDS kind of exhibition, but two people that I had shown with said I could not be included. So he said he's never seen this in art. So he just canceled the show. Part of their reason was that they wanted to focus solely on the gay community, only gay guys that had died. They knew, and that's why I think it was, they had two people that were very, very close to them, like my friend Fidel. It was that close to them who had died of AIDS, and they wanted to stress the gay aspect there. When I did my piece, it covered, because there wasn't just gay people that died. I covered as much as I could of different people that had died. One was a woman who had contracted disease from her dentist. He knew he was HIV. He did not clean his instruments. There was a way of doing it at that time with a machine called an autoclave, some kind of autoclave. And that would do it. He didn't clean them. She contracted when he did dental work, and she was bitter. She was on TV. She was in People magazine, Time magazine. And I included her. So they're coming in from a different angle, but I still contend that they need me too. They need all of us. Look at the criticism they gave to Dr. What's his name? Anthony Fauci? I think that's his full name. He was roundly criticized. They were shouting and yelling at him. Actually called him a murderer and say he was a complete idiot or something to that effect, screaming at him. Dr. Fauci was an immunologist. Now, what they wanted, the gay community, was they wanted him to find ways to ease the pain and suffering of the people they saw around them dying and to prolong their life. What he was doing, they didn't even know what AIDS was. They called it gay cancer. He was looking for a way to prevent this disease and what it really was. No one really knew what it was. What he did was made the connection through his research and his testing stuff to prove that it was HIV, which was discovered in France. Once you identified it, what its structure was, how it was transmitted, you could attack it. And so people started working on it. They developed the cocktail of drugs that you're taking and therapy methods that today you have Magic Johnson. Do you know who he is? He's a famous basketball player in LA. I see him on TV all the time. He's as healthy as can be. He has no traceable HIV virus. That would not have happened without Fauci. He was not gay. They were not immunologists. I'm not gay. I'm doing it this way. Now I had one guy come up to me. Not come up to me. He came to my house. He was a reporter for some trade. But he asked me, are you gay to me? I said, no. But I said, if you guys are going to beat this thing, you're going to need all of us. And it's true, the gay population is 10%. The black population is 15%. You think that's going to get it done? No, you need all of us. All of us to fight. Okay, so that brings us back to you guys, all right? You will have a choice like that. This guy had to close it down because there's no way you could have it both ways. It's a moment that is a which side are you on moment. For me, there's no question. I'm not going to change. I'm not going to let someone tell me what I can and can't do, but you can. And if you decide that these certain people, some people, if you say some people, we're going to listen to them, you've lost it. All right? Now, let's take an example of the other side. When I do my art, do I take anything away from that person to say whatever they want? I do not. This is not acting. Art is not like that. When I do my art, it's my art. I am not taking anything away from some people. Some people can do anything they want to and criticize me and say he does not have a right to do this in their art. No, your work incorporates humor, satire, irony in ways that can be jarring given the nature of what is being represented. Why is this juxtaposition an important artistic strategy for you? I think you want it to be jarring. If you put this and this together, you form a relationship. Sometimes it's this is good and this is bad. Sometimes it may be just a happenstance. Like whenever you do a collage project in school, you will get some kids will take a monkey and cut off a baby's head and put it on. That's what they call juxtaposition. But there are other ways of using it in which you combine images that cause you to experience something. You say, wow, that and that together. Juxtaposition in the hands of, let's say, a Dadaist or a surrealist. Look at those pictures. They can juxtapose in such a way that you don't know why it's juxtaposed, but it leaves you with a impression that will stick with you the rest of your life. If you've seen that Magritte, you've seen it forever. If you've seen that Man Ray or you've seen that Duchamp, it's there. That's why you use juxtaposition. It's like integral part of art. And so when I do it, I hope it. I don't want to give you an answer to anything, just like they didn't. But I want you to think about it, and I hope I put something in your head that you'll remember or think about. Just think about it. What is this about? You know, why is this guy doing this? Why did you show my work? I think part of it was that. Why did this guy put that together with this? There isn't an answer. Do you see there is no answer? It's to say, why did I put this together? Why did this apple on this guy's face stick with me? This painting was meant to kind of tell you the climate of America. You've seen the paintings of the artists I use, Winslow Homer and Thomas Eakins. That art is in this kind of a milieu. So this is my way of setting the stage for what I'm talking about, what's happening in America, art-wise. But this itself is not about art. It's the social conditions that existed at that time. Black historians and scholars said American history is not accurate in that it's gives too much credit to the white people and minimizes or erases black contribution. They also said that American history does not start with the Constitution or Declaration of Independence. Lin-Manuel Miranda has done Hamilton. It's got black people, women, brown people doing the rap version of history. None of those people would have been there. No black, no brown, no women. So they said that you cannot look at history like it begins at that point. You saw the one with Dutch people bringing slaves to America. The black concept of critical race theory says America starts there because the roots are set for the rest of America. The racism and slavery that ensued to this day started then. I wanted to do that for art. because much of art was on this level that it had nothing to do with what was happening around it. And I said it has everything to do with what is happening around it. The images there are pictures that existed at the time. Some of them are contemporary models, but they're showing you some of the implements that were used. It was meant to be put on people. And so a lot of these things you see, that's where those images come from. I just paraphrased it a little bit. Article 1, Section 2, that's in the Constitution. And that, what does that 3/5 mean? 3/5 is how they defer to the South. The South had a lot of slaves, but if you took the only voting population was white landowners and said that that's who the Congress would represent those people, they'd come out really short. So they said, okay, but you got to count our slaves as 3/5 of a person. Come on. 3/5 of a person. It's in the Bible too, you know. The Bible never condemns slavery. What it does do in those passages that I have, the Exodus, whatever, they're talking about you should treat them decently, you know, but you can beat them, but not to death. Now you take the picture of, let's say, the guy has these things on his back. Those are keloid tumors. They're not tumors like you think of. Those are scars that are permanent. They're built up tissue from beating after beating after beating, not being able to heal properly. They would pour salt on these to hurt more. Now, this person is not something I made up or something, it's just a painting. That's done on what is called cabinet photo. And it's a guy who's from Louisiana who's just showing you what they had done to him. Those are whippings, beating after beating after beating. Next to him is this woman that I had a more of a literal description. It said that this slave was punished by her female, a lady master, whatever you want to call it, but a woman. I kind of looked at this kind of sketchy thing that they had with it, and it looked to me, if a woman was doing that, it was done from hitting them with boiling water, because they looked like they were spread out in such a way that a splash pattern wouldn't occur. So I just turned them into burn scars, because that's what I thought of that picture. So that's kind of manipulated, I agree. The one next to it with the guy standing there with his collar, this thing, he wore that. He has a leg brace on that kept him from running. There's other pictures that he shows with a wooden paddle that he was whipped with. Now this guy is a real person too. You have his name and everything, but look on his forehead and you'll see some letters right here. He was branded in the face. That's what slavery is. That is slavery. It's done under torture, death, terror. So that's where those pictures come from. I did not make them up. I do not show them for any other reason to say that is what slavery is. It was cruelty. That's the only way you can do this. When the Civil War ended, there was a Reconstruction period by Andrew Johnson, who was a Southerner. If Lincoln had lived, oh gosh, what could have happened to the South in slavery? But he was assassinated, as you know. Johnson just basically withdrew federal troops, and the South just took the same old guys, the slave owners and the people that fought in the war. They took over the government. They started the Klan. You've seen Birth of a Nation. That's the way America tells its history. Blacks were raping and pillaging, and so the Ku Klux Klan came and saved the white womanhood. In fact, the South kept the kind of form of slavery. The law said that the emancipation, that you could not have slavery in America, except prisoners that had committed crimes. Like if you're in prison, they can make you do the laundry for nothing. They took that law and recreated a form of slavery. The way it worked was they're called black codes. And what they would do, if they see a black guy who was young and fit and could work on that same cotton field, you accused him of trespassing or loitering. He's walking down the street, like today. They're arresting people that are walking down the street to deport them. In those days, they would just say, what are you doing here? How much money you got? You're loitering. And boom, you were in striped clothes, chains on your leg, breaking rocks on the road, or picking cotton. Sundown towns were across the nation, cities that this one picture is from the 1930s. That is the exact sign that was put up in Hawthorne. Hawthorne is in my neighborhood. It's part of LA. If you've flown into LAX, Los Angeles Airport, that's where Hawthorne is. There were 10,000 cities put that sign up. That word, the N word, you must know that I will never say it. I believe it's a foul, despicable word, and I'll never verbally say it. What I do in this case then, do I soften it, that sign? And do I put down colored people, don't let the sign? I can't use an alternative and make the same impact. I have to use that word to show you how hateful that period was. That's a real label, I didn't make this stuff up. You say, should I show it? I'm saying, like critical race theory, that's there. They were selling that product, and they used that caricature and that word. Later, they knew it was wrong. They changed it later. They changed it to Negro, which is a word that's valid. The N word is not. They know it. Everybody knows it. But they thought it was funny to use it. They also changed that character. The same with the coons. Coon is a word that is also, everyone knows is a pejorative term. Be a cartoonist. Look what they use as an example. But if you're good at it, you can earn $20 a week. Or maybe if you're really good, $200 a week. A march in Washington, D.C., they had that. They were not ashamed of this. That's open racism. You see, they don't wear their masks. They don't care if you know who they are. If you want to Google who was in that organization, you can find American presidents, justices in the Supreme Court, senators, teachers, lawyers across the nation. The most populous state was Indiana. What I was trying to show you, it was ubiquitous throughout society, racism. In California, you might think California is a liberal place. It wasn't, okay? So it's everywhere in America. That's what the Black historians were trying to say. You can't study America without saying, this is in the DNA of America right from the get-go, from 1619 right up to today, really. It's still there. So some of those states that are voting today for Trump, look at their Ku Klux Klan record. They weren't all down in Mississippi. They were everywhere. Sports Illustrated. That was the magazine back then. And that cover, I remember, it shows white majorettes, cheerleaders in a kind of a takeoff of a Confederate soldier's uniform, and they were carrying Confederate battle flags. At other times, they had little kepis too, those gray Civil War hats. That team that in 1962 was all white. Not one black player on that team. There's pictures that show you the 70, 80, 90 guys. Every one of them is white. And that's not the only school. You can find them of almost every Southern team before 1965 or so. Now, today you look at that team, Ole Miss, I'll bet you it's 70, 80% black guys playing on that team. Southern teams, the SEC, Southern Eastern Conference, which is those slave states, ex-slave states, all have the best teams, football teams in America. All the major stars are people of color. That's just the way it is now. But where were those people before? So I lived during those times. I've lived to see how black people were treated then. And I'm telling you that people don't know that today. They don't know the degree of suffering. I do. I watched it. I watch it to happen to people I know. So that's why I did this piece. Remember, this piece is not about art per se. It's about setting the tone of the times. Now, why did Henry O. Tanner have to leave America? That's why. So it does affect art. He went to Europe because he could be killed. He could be beaten. He could be told not to walk on the sidewalk in America. He certainly could not be an artist in America. Henry O. Tanner's a really strong painter, I think, but he couldn't do it in America. So that's what this picture is about. Hey, this is where these guys, artists, had to live, white or black, in that milieu. I think that's enough, right? Okay. I'm going to talk to you about some of the paintings that are in the shows. There's a banner across all of the paintings, and that's a didactic that it's kind of critical to the architecture of the piece that where it's located. And when I start these paintings, I have kind of a general idea of where things are going to go, or what the structure of the piece is going to be, but I don't, or very seldom know exactly what the images are going to be there. In this case, if you look at the banner, it says Renaissance Fave. Fave, I think you know, means favorite. In other words, which do I think is the best painting of the Renaissance? I think most people would say it's Leonardo da Vinci, and they'll mention the Mona Lisa. To me, it's the Botticelli. Both the Venus, Birth of Venus, and the Primavera. I think those are wonderful paintings. This painting is just marvelous when you see it. It knocks your socks off. It's in the Uffizi, and I had no idea what that picture was really about. Because you look, at that time there was a book called, or a company that did art books called Skira, and they were always blue. I always thought it was the best painting of the Renaissance. Now, the Mona Lisa, to me the Mona Lisa, now you may disagree, I'm not trying to argue this point exactly, I'm saying this is my fave. But to talk about this painting, Renaissance fave means that's my favorite. And it says, just one word, Benjamin, are you listening? And then it says Botticelli. So, who's my favorite? One word, Benjamin. Are you listening? Botticelli. Where does that come from? Well, I don't know if you know the movie even. It's The Graduate. It was The Graduate. Dustin Hoffman plays Benjamin. So it's not Benjamin me, it's Benjamin the character in the movie. And what it's about is a guy who, as the movie title says, is a graduate. He just graduated college and he's confused, like, I don't know what you went through, but you don't know what you're going to do. And he's at a graduation celebration and everyone's giving him advice. Do this, do that, go into this. And one character comes up and he's going to give him the inside dope. And so he says to Benjamin, Benjamin, just one word, Benjamin, are you listening? And he says, plastics. That line sticks somehow, in America anyway, and it stuck with me. So I just use that, and you'll see that constantly throughout the series. And it's just my way of saying, referring it to, this is, every history, is a personal value system. It's not objective in that sense. It's what I think of it, all right? What I think of history. Western culture colonized the world. You know that in a lot of the world, the major language is English or French or Portuguese or Spanish. That's because of colonization. And a lot of the art in the world is influenced by Western art. They know Western art. And all over the world, they know this painting. And so all over the world, they do their takeoff. I call it a takeoff or a kind of their version of it. Now, I didn't know I was going to use Donald Trump, but what I came across was some images of Kamala Harris pledging allegiance. And it, to me, was much like the Venus pose. So I just put her in there. I thought that was an idea. 2024 means that it did it in 2024. That's when I started this picture. And I hope she would win. I'm frankly appalled at the Trump election. So there she is. What do I put on the other side? Well, the picture of Trump that was going around that I think captured a lot of him was him hugging and kissing the American flag. If I tilted him, he would mimic the woman who's bringing the robe to cover Venus. So that's why I put him there. Now, the thing that says Project 2025, I did not know at that time that Trump was going to win. Project 2025 was a manifesto by really reactionary people who wanted, that's the source of his MAGA, bring America back, take us back. And he said, I'll never do anything with that Project 2020. He's doing it right now, exactly what they want, cutting off immigration. All of the stuff that you see he's doing comes from that Project 2025. How he got elected is mind-boggling to me. A writer, H.L. Mencken, and he's really an elitist snob, and I don't agree with a lot of what he says, but he did say something that was very prophetic to me. He said, and here again I'm going to paraphrase, right? He said something to the effect like, on some splendid day, to the delight of the plain folks, that's the average American he's talking about, they would have put in a moron into the White House. I believe that day has come. When I hear that he wants to annex Canada, buy Greenland, make an American resort city out of the Gaza Strip, change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, I heard he wanted to change the Persian Gulf because Iranians are out, for him, and change it to the Arabian Gulf because they're giving him an airplane, and bomb Mexico. Come on. Sending the Marines into LA just now. Naval shock troops to police a demonstration. I don't know what you call it, but to me that's moronic. What about those pictures down at the bottom? Now, the first one is simply a skeleton that I use because it shows you underneath there we're all exactly the same, all right? The way the Venus is used as a reference point is that they take that same figure, that same slim, long-legged, narrow hips figure, and just change the ethnic quality of the dress on that figure. To me, that figure is not what the normal woman's proportions are. That is Platonic ideal. That is Botticelli saying this is the goddess. The picture I depicted was unlike the others, obviously. It wasn't Venus in that shape. The picture was a real model. This was a photograph superimposed over the painting of the Venus. And this model, I chose her because she was looking out at you, just right into your eyes. I don't like my version particularly, but because I couldn't capture it. She's looking right at you and she says, I'm beautiful, I'm sexy, and if you don't like it, shove it. That is what I thought was wonderful about that model. She was not afraid to show herself, and she was not afraid to say, I'm Venus. The Indian, well, there are lots of Indian ones with wearing a sari, this is the same Indian dress, and sometimes with multiple arms, but it's done the same figure, just in Indian garb. But I like the blue. It's part of the Hindu pantheon, of which I'm not totally familiar. I'm not sure who that is, but I like that image, that statue especially of that figure, so I just replaced it with that. The Japanese one was, they were doing a takeoff of the Monet, the woman in a kimono, which is a white blondish hair woman. And I just changed it to an Asian, kind of redid the body a little bit. So the next one is simply an abstraction. It's just to show you another take on it now, kind of Picasso-ish. Now, why did I put Miss Piggy in there? Miss Piggy is there because it's humor. I use that as partly a draw. If I just did like a strong political strident statement, people would just turn off on it, I believe. So you put a little bit of honey on it, and the humor is always thrown in there so that people say, ha ha ha, Miss Piggy. And that's a question that is always plaguing artists, How do you get them to look at your work? This is my way, is to inject humor. The piece you're looking at, for example, what drew you to that? I think what it was those artists. The Baroque elephant in the room. I think you know the expression of the elephant in the room. It's something that's there that is very significant, but is almost like it's kind of hidden. Why the Dutch? Well, this is covering Dutch art at that time. In 1619, Dutch ships brought the first slaves to America. First settlements in America from England, and they brought slaves in. That's the history of America, and we don't always want to discuss it. And it was a Dutch ship. How did the Dutch get rich? Not only through slave trading, of course, but through trading to the world and colonization. Now, whenever you see Dutch paintings, you'll see gazillions of them, of which they show their wealth. They'll show, like in these pictures here, with rugs and look at their costumes. Every once in a while, you'll come across one where there's a figure in the back there that is, to me, they're showing their property. And so I put them in here. Now, I wanted to make them so that you would look at them. So I did them in black and white grays. That's kind of my reverse thinking there, how I do things. When I looked at that kid back there, or I looked at the woman and her child. Who are they? They're domestics or slaves or servants. They're part of the ownership of these people. And now you talk about ubiquitous paintings from Holland. You've seen all those dozens and dozens of pictures of their showing their wealth, of huge tables full of meat, game, fruits, vegetables, silver. That's puffing. I'm showing my wealth here. When you look at that painting, and it's pretty much straight, not as good, of course, as the original, but you know that that woman is not the owner of that stuff. That's a white owner showing his property, and she's included. The bottom one is, to me, almost like a role reversal. I just blanked the faces out of the other people because I didn't think they really mattered from my point of view. And the banner says woke Baroque. That's my clever wordplay. Woke. Now, you know the term woke, I think. It's looking at history again and saying, you know, these people also existed and contributed and were part of your culture. You may not acknowledge it, but they were there. And Trump is trying to destroy everything that's woke. It's an artist that I think was woke, who would look at a room and say, that's somebody over there too. That's the kind of artist I would call my faves. Rembrandt did this series. Jews are not usually depicted, except when they're burning them, at the stake. The first one is Moses. The next one is called Young Jew. The next one is called Jewish Bride. And the next one is Old Jew. But he's looking at them like they're there and they deserve a full painting of themselves, right? That's not usual. He's woke. If you look through Dutch paintings, you don't find many black people. Rembrandt, and again, they're not that servant in the back. They look like real individuals. Like, that's somebody. In other words, he's seeing these people. Just like America erased black people from our history, most of Europe did the same thing. This guy sees them. This is where my irony thing comes in. You know that when the Nazis conquered any country, there were always people in that country who joined up. They would recruit them by making these posters of Nazis in their, strong thing with the SS. That's recruiting for the Waffen SS. And on his collar, there's a Dutch roundel. It's the insignia that they put on airplanes. It is the Dutch symbol. There's a caricature of a Jew. Look at it. It's this grotesque. No Jews allowed. Anne Frank, the thing that impressed me of Holland that I really remember was going up these stairs, finding a bookcase, opening it, and that's where Anne Frank lived. Why I put that title up, there are people who are still reactionaries, basically is what I'm trying to say. She was betrayed by another Dutch person. She died in Bergen-Belsen. That family was betrayed. The yellow star, you know what that means. That's the Dutch version of it. But suppose I had to wear a rising sun everywhere I went. That's what happened to these people. Now, what is this last series about? It says Black Pete. You might know about this, but you might not. This character is at Christmas time. They have their Santa Claus. He's this elegant white guy with a white flowing beard. In Holland, they have another character called Black Pete, and he accompanies St. Nicholas. They still do this character, but it's become controversial. Now in America, you cannot do blackface like this out in the open. This is the character that they're depicting in blackface with red lipstick. And some of these signs says, "You're welcome," because there is a controversy in Holland. They know that's racist, right? They're not dumb. But the people that want to use it, like in America, will find you every rationale to keep doing this. So you're welcome here, Black Pete, and we love you, Black Pete, and all that stuff. To tell you why they know it's racist is they're modifying it, Do they understand there's a whole line of thinking? We do this in the United States all the time, of rationalization of, well, it's really not racist, it's this. They're saying now he's not black. He came down the chimney and he's covered with soot. It's obviously not the case, but they're trying to change it. The Velasquez painting is also about how you view a scene. Velasquez painted the court, so he had to make them look good. One character that he painted, that princess with her hairdos, it's showing the opulence is what I was trying to do there. The Meninas, in his famous painting, they always talk about the structure of the painting, which is really quite phenomenal. It talks about him reflected over here, and there's the reflection of the princess of what's your point of view in this picture and all that stuff. Okay, that's one version of it. But also over here is a person that in America, the phrase I often like to use is little people. And I prefer the word dwarf. I don't believe it's a pejorative term. Some people may, and they use it pejoratively, but I think it is a word that is more scientific of what is happening here. But anyway, there is a dwarf or a little person, and he saw it and he put her in that painting. And I think the woke guys, whoever they were, looked over there. Not, here's the image that we're showing you, this rich, wealthy, whatever. But over there, there's another person in that room. Down below, the guy in the red cloak, the dwarf or the little person. When I came to the Prado, I saw that painting and it shook me. It's like the birth of Venus. It knocked my socks off. There was this dwarf, little person, looking back at me, and he wasn't meant to be a jester. He is a jester, but he's looking at me like an individual who's glaring at me and saying, who are you looking at? Don't condescend me. And look at his fists, they're clenched there. That painting really stuck with me. And so I just looked for others and I put them in there, and they're all individuals. So all I'm saying there is Velasquez, he's my favorite of that particular period. And Spanish artists, I think, have some sort of affinity. I have an affinity with them. Goya is also one of my favorites. Now, there's a next painting, a different format. You know that there are little paintings and what I call a bigger painting. These bigger paintings are not always about art. My theory of art history, I learned from actually a Marxist professor that I went to a lecture. And we're not talking about Lenin or Marx, but he said something that I know to be true. Instinctively, I knew it. But he articulated it. Anyway, this guy said, you cannot ever understand art until you understand the social, economic context in which it was produced. You cannot tell me about that picture until you say who painted, for whom, and why. And what were the social influences on that? Well, that's why I try to set here, is with these big pieces, kind of set the social context in which the art I'm going to talk about exists. I oftentimes include art in this series, but it's really more about saying, look, this is what was happening. White pride worldwide is a racist American Nazis, white supremacist saying. If you think I'm saying I'm for that, you don't understand irony. I'm saying that's what happened. I came across this map, and I'm not sure it's totally accurate, but it said that that basically the whole world was under the influence of Europe. European values, European art, European music, European culture, because they had controlled it or owned it or whatever at one time or another. And there were only a few countries. I think that's Liberia and Myanmar. Burma was, I think, used as a buffer zone. And Japan and Korea were not conquered. But now they are under the influence of these cultures. The reasons why Europe did it was, one, for God. They always thought that what they were doing was saving from eternal damnation. And so I included some missionaries there with their charges. The gold part is, come on, they came there to steal. Anything they can get hold of. One of the things is the Koh-i-Noor diamond, which is now in the Royal Crown. Look at the Queen, Charles now, but right in the middle, there's the Koh-i-Noor diamond. They took it from some kid Maharaja and British troops who just took all that stuff. You have museums that show you the best of African art. Bronzes that are, where did they come from? The Brits stole them. They took them from the Royal Palace, in fact, a lot of that stuff. And all that this picture shows is the soldiers that are showing off. Yeah, I stole this. Belgium was one of the worst colonial powers, especially in the Congo, and that mutilation is the least of it. They were horrible. And I think people in Congo will tell you that. They glorify Victoria. They always show the best side. Whenever they show a bad side, like the Opium Wars or whatever, they show John Bull. Like, she's not part of that, it was this part of society. It was the parliamentary side, not the royal part. It was a royal part. She's a drug dealer, but she's also the Empress of India. Now, if you're the Empress of India and you have 4 million people starve on you at a time, you got to own it. Pax Britannica. One of the things they said about Victoria was she kept the peace in the world, including in Europe. They said with the great powers. Well, what is the Franco-Prussian War? It's right during her reign. There were wars all the time. There was no Pax Britannica. And they say that at that time she was the policeman of the world, about suppressing all the colonies that people didn't want to be colonized. There's a whole series of movies, and I use the movie again as looking back. The Brits look at it at one time as if it was a glorious thing, these wonderful redcoats fighting the savages, They made tons of those movies. Four Feathers, you've probably seen the Zulu one. Zulus are the people that the British fought before the Bantus came in. The Khartoum is the Sudan area. And in other words, those are heroic movies of heroic women fleeing the Chinese. I think it's a Boxer Rebellion, not the Opium Wars. That's their version of history. Below are some of the indigenous films that are made, and they're not so complimentary about the British. There's India and China. The last one is a Maori from New Zealand. Most of these guys lost, but there are individuals who won certain battles or did certain things that the people of those countries say that was really a heroic try at freedom about it. Now, it's not that white people all were going to say it was a good thing or bad thing or whatever. will often condemn it, but there's always a little caveat in there. Well, this is the rum went from here, and the slaves went from here, and the molasses went there. Or there were people being really oppressed by those horrible popes in the Spanish countries, and so we had to help them out. A little softening of it. Don't soften it. When I look at colonialism, what I see, and the metaphor I use it myself, someone coming into my house and saying, I own this place now. You can live in the shack out there, out the outskirts, or I may own this half of your house and the other half is going to be owned by some other person. And everything you have of value, I don't have that much, but everything you have of value, I'm going to sell and make a profit of. You will continue to do all the work that I need to have done under my conditions, right? And that not only that, you're going to pay rent. Your work was censored before by the Orange County Museum of Art in 2022. Has this experience changed your approach to making and talking about your work at all? No. What do you think is the relevance of showing this work in London? I didn't have this show in mind when I started this out. I mean, I didn't think there was any possibility that it would be shown outside the United States. That you guys would be the first? No. Never entered my head. But there it is. That's how I think life works. Circumstances beyond anyone's control. What do you want audience to think or feel after visiting the exhibition? What do I think people should get out of this? How to look at history. And always couch it in terms of who did it, why they did it, and when they did it. And I try to put in clues in all the pictures of when it was done, right now. And you can, if you know when events occurred, you know this is done in 2024, 25, that period. So I hope you look at history with a little bit of skepticism. No matter what is told to you about who you think, what you think you are, question it. Right? What I want you guys to think about it, I hope what all my art does, it doesn't give you an answer of anything. I'm trying to create almost an ambivalence of what it is. I want you to think, what is this guy doing? And that's why I like your questions in a way. I don't like to answer them verbally. I want you to look at it and raise that question in your head. I want you not to come away with any answers, but a question in your head. Why am I concerned with this picture? What is it that he's doing? And if I can get you to even think about it a little bit, what is this piece about? I think I've succeeded. But believe me, there is no one way I want you to come out of this. That art's not complete. It takes a sender and a receiver. It's a tree falling in the forest. I'm that tree falling in the forest. Now, if you're not there to listen to it, okay. But if you're there, what are you? You're going to run away, go curiously look at it, whatever. That's kind of the thing I look at, is you put up something that hopefully engages you enough to raise questions. The next one is, that's about the paintings. Okay, that's it. So I'm through. Thank you for listening. I hope I didn't bore you to tears. Okay. Thank you.